Good evening and welcome to Money Matters. I'm your host, Brian Cahoot from HJ Wealth Management. My co-host is Patricia Dunn from Merrill Lynch. Our special guest is Jeff Stollman from Rocky Mountain Tech Marketing. We're glad you joined us. We have a great show. Pat, great to see you.
Good to see you again.
We always warn the viewers not to time this because the show is taped. But with that said, the market's been volatile. We've probably been saying this for the last couple of years. I mean, the last quarter we had this kind of 10% down and a full circle. We just mentioned the market had just gone positive. So what do you see?
It's interesting. It took till the 1st of April to actually get the Dow and the NASDAQ into positive territory. And since then, it's been pretty strong, at least at this point in the month. So we're hoping that it'll continue. But we have had 2 quarters in a row of contracting S&P earnings. When they finalize the first quarter earnings, they think that they will also be negative. And they're not holding out much hope for second quarter earnings. Everything's being pinned on the second half of the year.
Right.
But if the market's behavior so far in April is any indication, they might be wrong.
Yeah, so the R word's been thrown out, recession, and I think to your point, people have said, well, we're in an earnings recession because of the earning drop in the last 2 quarters. Do you think we're headed into an economic recession, or?
Actually, no. This has been mostly around energy and a few other related industries like manufacturing and materials. But the United States economy is actually in much better shape than the rest of the world. So really the positives regarding our economy outweigh the negatives, so we do not see a recession.
So are you telling from an asset allocation perspective, are you having clients overweight U.S. or?
Yes, and interestingly enough, not to rule out international. And in the last couple weeks, the emerging markets have started raising their heads.
To them, right?
Yes, finally.
Right,
so I'm not underweighting international. It has its place. It may be the next one up to bat.
Yeah, it's been an underperformer. So as the reversion to the mean people believe, it's probably its time and the sun is about to come. So just when people are ready to give up on it is probably the wrong time to do that. So I know we're both proponents of asset allocation, kind of stick to it, and that's probably still the case. Unfortunately, I guess we haven't been able for the last couple of years not to talk about oil. Oil's kind of in this trading range, and people are making cases that it's going to go back down to $25, and then there's the case that it's going to go back to $80. What's Merrill Lynch's outlook or your outlook?
I'm not going to touch that one. It could go either way.
Right, exactly.
But the result of this, what we really thought was that with the lower oil prices, that this would spur consumer spending.
It hasn't happened, right?
No.
So what are they doing with that?
They're saving it, which actually is good in the long run because the debt levels in this country are way too high. Yeah. And of course we have aging baby boomers approaching retirement, and many of them haven't found themselves in a position to be able to afford to save. So maybe these lower oil prices is actually helping them save for retirement. Let's hope so.
Let's hope so, exactly. So, the other issue out there that gets a lot of press is the student loan, what people are referring to as a bubble. You think there's any way out of it? I mean, how do we solve that problem?
That is a huge problem, and I'm not so sure the government's solution to just forgive all those loans is necessarily the right answer.
Right. Yeah.
But you're right. That is probably the next shoe to drop.
Yeah,
what do we do with all these loans? Because the kids getting out of college, they say as a rule of thumb, you should only borrow as much as you think you're going to earn in salary your first year out of college. And I think that's a good rule of thumb, but I don't think that has been followed.
Yeah, I think that's, the problem is, college is a competitive business, right? And they're trying to get students in through the program, and no one's sitting there saying, well, the debt you're taking on is going to match the major you took, and you have no way to, support that load.
Exactly. And then it may fall back on mom and dad.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So, interest rates, I mean, also another topic for years that we say, well, rates are going to go up. They got to go up. They're going to eventually go up. And, one of these days we'll be right, I guess. So the Federal Reserve last year raised rates. They got a lot of negative press for doing it. Seems like they're willing to sit a little tighter this year and not be that aggressive. What's your outlook? I mean, it's putting savers and retirees in a bad spot because yields are almost impossible to come by.
Absolutely. It is hurting the saver right now. And you're starting to see products come out that are cash alternatives or bond alternatives or complements to a bond fund. So the industry is starting to respond to this, but you're absolutely right. And I think because of this, the Fed has to raise rates.
Yep.
It's when are they going to do it?
Right.
And we're hoping that we get 1 or 2 more raises before the end of this year.
Yep.
But I'm beginning to think it's going to be more like the second half than the second quarter.
Seems that way, right? So
Yeah.
I guess the next bite of the apple's June, so we'll see what they do here. But
Yeah.
it's been interesting. Obviously the banks are dying for them to raise rates because they've been under pressure. But I get scared when clients start reaching for yield, right? Because
Yes. If they don't reach the right way,
right, they could be in for a nasty surprise. Right?
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of them learned it with a lot of the MLPs that had nice yields, and obviously they were tied to the energy sector that wasn't sustainable. So I think we tell our clients all the time, risk and return come together. So if someone's offering you a high yield, it's coming at a price.
it's
right?
coming at a price. So know what you're getting into.
Know what you're getting in, eyes wide open. So, Pat, you have time for a question?
Yeah.
So Mark Byers from Chester Springs asked, what is the Internet of Things, and what are some companies in this area?
Very good question, and it speaks right to our guest
we'll
in
have to add
today's
more
show.
on it,
So we're going to have
absolutely.
more on it. But the Internet of Things is the technology behind connecting things to your mobile, like your phone, and broadband. It's a growth area, definitely a growth area, and I can't wait to interview our guest today to find out even more about that. Companies that are participating in this area include Apple and Google and IBM, and then some that you wouldn't think of right away, like Medtronic, Johnson & Johnson, AT&T, Verizon, because of course they have to carry it. Now, understand, I'm not making any recommendations here. The question was, what are some companies participating? And I'm answering that question, but I'm not making any recommendations. Before you venture into this area, I would suggest you check with your professional financial advisor who knows your risk tolerance and your time horizon and ultimately your goals. And they'll be able to tell you whether an investment in this area is suitable for you or not.
Right, and what we like to warn clients and viewers all the time is a great company doesn't always make a great stock, right?
Exactly.
So do your homework, talk to the professional, go in, make an educated decision before you go invest. So great answer. If you have a question, here's how you send it into Money Matters.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Welcome back. Now it's time to introduce our special guest, Jeff Stollman from Rocky Mountain Tech Marketing. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks very much.
I guess first, I know you have a pretty broad array of experience. Tell us what you do. What's Rocky Mountain all about, and
Well, we're basically a consultancy, but we also do a lot of invention, and we cross a variety of technologies for a variety of industry sectors. It's kind of anything that's interesting, legal, and ethical.
all you
we'll tackle.
Excellent. So.
Well, a big part of that is being a thought leader.
Yes.
Can you explain to our audience just what it means to be a thought leader?
Well, my definition, which is possibly self-serving, is people tend to get in a routine of thinking a certain way if they're doing the same thing all the time. And to me, it's a matter of being able to frame the problem correctly. That's usually the first failure that people have. And if you're always looking at a problem a certain way, you often miss the opportunity to find a new way to do something. And I myself am a polymath, so as I say, I work in a variety of fields and I work across a variety of industries. So oftentimes I'm able to see that there's a much better way to frame the problem in the first place. A good example is I just received an RFP this week where a company wanted to improve their customer-facing touch points. So they were looking, they wanted someone to propose a technology to improve their customer-facing touch points. But that was pretty much the extent of their RFP. They gave a couple suggested technologies. But they really never defined what those touch points are, what the metrics are that they want to use to measure them, why it has to be a technology solution. It could be a process solution or a people solution. And they're missing out on a lot of opportunities just because they think it has to be a technology solution. May well be, but it's just a little too open-ended, and it doesn't, at the same time, restrictive because they don't really articulate the problem very effectively. So once you solve the problem of defining it, the solutions come a lot easier. I mean, Albert Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind you used to create it.
I like that.
Yeah.
So you alluded to it in that answer about disruptive technologies. You think of like Uber and maybe what Elon Musk is doing. What do you see some disruptive technologies out there that are probably change?
Yeah. Well, three big ones that are getting a lot of play, and for good reason, I would say would be blockchain technology, the Internet of Things, which is one of your viewers had the question on, and artificial intelligence. I mean, there's a lot more, but we have limited time.
Yeah, exactly. So.
I'm not familiar with the term blockchain technology. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. Most people don't have any clue what blockchain technology is, but most people have heard of Bitcoin.
Yes.
Okay.
Bitcoin is kind of the killer app, or at least not really the killer app, the first application using blockchain. It's a technology that allows you to create a non-repudiatable transaction log. And once you have a non-repudiatable transaction log, you can apply that across a variety of industries. The financial industry right now, every major bank is investing millions of dollars in this. I'm talking about Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Credit Suisse, UBS, and they're all looking at this because they think it's going to be the basis for clearing of current items, but also things like bonds and derivatives that don't really have an organized market, because it's fast and it's cheap and you can transfer money. Bitcoin, people who already use Bitcoin will know that if you want to send foreign remittances, instead of going to Western Union and paying $15 to send 50, you can pay $1 or some small amount, and the currency translation to the other country kind of happens automatically. You buy up some bitcoins, you transfer the bitcoins to somebody else, they cash them in whatever country they're in, and they get the local currency, and the transaction fees are very small.
That's why, when it first came out, you heard a lot of people saying it's interesting from a payment processing perspective, maybe not a currency, and I guess that's what you're really referring to, is it may change the way things are processed. And
yeah, I mean, it's dramatic. I mean, as I say, the financial services industry is really glomming onto that. They recognize very quickly how important this can be for their industry, because there's so many transactions that take place, and they can take place very rapidly. But we're applying it right now. We're developing a solution for the pharmaceutical industry where there's a requirement, a legal requirement. There's something called the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, which is a way to try to detect counterfeit products, gray market products, diluted products in the market, because it's not only a public health problem, it's also costing the industry billions of dollars every year. And by 2023, they have to have a solution in place. And this is kind of an ideal solution because you have this non-repudiatable transaction log. You can track the ownership of a product from the manufacturer to the distributor to the dispenser. And if a distributor buys 50 cases of X and he sells 51, we'll know it. And the whole basis of Bitcoin is one of the key features of the blockchain is it will keep you from double spending. So where that 51st came from, whether it's a counterfeit or he diluted the first 50 to make a 51st, we can't tell that. All we know is that this is the guy who did the suspicious transaction, and then forensic analysis will have to be, brought in. But
So it's a software that does this?
it's in software, yes. Blockchain is actually kind of a suite of different software techniques, and includes encryption, which is why it helps keep it non-repudiatable. And it also uses various approaches to get consensus, so that what goes into it has already been confirmed as being accurate and true. So it's a very good technique and it can be applied to a lot of things. But another area we looked at applying it into is the maritime fuel industry, where they have to meet environmental regulations as to how much sulfur is in their fuel. And it's very expensive given the large number of ships and the vastness of the oceans. You can't just sit there with a stack monitor, because no one's going to spend the money on those. But we can just track it from the refinery, how much sulfur's in the fuel. We know how much they're buying. We know how much they're using, because there's two different standards depending on whether you're in open ocean or you're like along the coast of the U.S. or Europe. And we can kind of impute how much they need and figure out if somebody's cheating. Because all the big companies obey the law, but they're losing millions of dollars to the small guys who have very little reputational risk. They're known as cheap,
Right. So,
and it's a problem.
We touched on the Internet of Things. We had a question. It's one of the areas you said you have. Well, what do you see? I'm not sure everyone even understands what that. They hear the term, but I'm not sure they even understand what exactly is going on in there, and how you see it changing the future.
Well, as Pat alluded, it's basically taking devices and connecting them pretty much to the internet, so that devices can now talk to each other, not just be there for a person. And so, people you hear of Fitbits, which you wear it around your wrist, it reports through your smartphone and tells you how much you've walked today, maybe how many calories you burned, what your temperature, various devices will give you a lot of health metrics. And those are getting a lot of public press as consumer items, but to some extent there's just a lot of novelty in them, and a lot of Fitbits end up on the shelf after people have had them for several weeks. But in the enterprise, they're making a very big difference. You can now start instrumenting things like pipelines, where you can have instruments all along the way that are reporting back using some radio frequency. They can be reporting back through a cell phone network. We built a solution for the electric utility industry, where we instrument every single power pole to determine if that pole is tilting and maybe about to fall, or one of the cross arms is tilting and about to fall, as well as where is there current at that pole. So when there's an outage, rather than having to drive up and down miles and miles of roads looking for where the outage started and where the problem is, we will know exactly which pole is the problem and where the problem is.
So if it's about to fall, somebody gets presumably some kind of text message saying this pole and this.
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah, they'll basically have a screen that kind of gives them status, some kind of diagnostic screen, depending on what they want, how they want to arrange that.
I can see this could be incredible with like a Katrina or some other big natural disaster.
Absolutely. You can now just put weather instruments out. They're one of the things that's making the Internet of Things happen is that the instruments themselves are now very small and very cheap, and the communication bandwidth has gotten increasingly inexpensive. So you can put out a slew of these sensors of different types of sensors, and you can see a storm coming. You can put some stuff out on the ocean and spot a tsunami before it happens.
Wow.
It's there's the applications are kind of mind-boggling, and the different ways you could potentially apply this.
Well, that leads to the next question. If we have all of these Internet of Things interconnected, we can't be far away from the concept of artificial intelligence. Would you speak to that?
Yeah, artificial intelligence is another very important area, and one of the things that we're able to do is now with all these sensors, we can start making sense of the data. Data are just data until they become information, and artificial intelligence is very good in translating data into usable information. So the whole notion of drivable cars, or even in current cars that people have, backup sensors, and an alarm will go off because the sensor, not only do you see the picture possibly on a screen, but the sensor knows that you're within 3 feet of an object, and it'll get louder as you get closer. And it's artificial intelligence that's allowing this picture to be translated into distances. That's doing the calculation. There's in the driverless car, obviously, there's even more requirement for artificial intelligence. One of the issues is kind of what's the rule set.
Right.
That's not a technical issue; it's a political issue. But I mean, you have the problem of if there's a car that's gone haywire, do you want it to kill one person to avoid 6?
Right. Well, yeah.
And who's going to make that decision? That decision is going to be programmed in if that car is driving. But that's kind of at the fringe, some of the issues that people will have to solve. The ability to then have disabled people, older people, intoxicated people using driverless cars, independent of kind of the loss of anxiety now, the less stress of having to sit there in traffic. You just go about your business, sit on your laptop and peck around while the car gets there, and the fact that it takes a little longer because the car was going slow to avoid a traffic jam becomes less of a problem. It's kind of leave the driving to us.
Yes, yes. So, our viewers are here as investment ideas. Who do you see some of the winners of these technology, Internet of Things, or artificial intelligence?
Well, that's a really interesting problem, because there are kind of 2 different types of companies that are approaching this. A lot of the large companies, as Pat mentioned, you have people in the Internet of Things like IBMs and stuff like that, and
they have Watson,
Cisco.
Right?
and those companies certainly will benefit from their investments, but because they're not pure plays and they're quite diversified, I think with the exception of IBM, because they're trying to make that almost their mainstream next business. But I'm not an investment advisor, so so you have these very large companies that have potential to make a lot of money. It's a matter of how that tips the balance given their diversification. And then you have a lot of small players, many of whom will fail, a large number of whom, however, will get bought out.
Right.
But most of those will happen before they're public companies. So if you're not an angel investor or you aren't part of a venture capital fund, it becomes a little bit hard to pick those people.
Right.
But you do have some companies will be successful at a certain level, and then they'll eventually get bought out, and it will be possible for the public to be able to participate.
Right. 3D printing was getting all the press for a while, and you haven't heard much. Is it still viable, or
3D printing. Again, most of these disruptive technologies are really making the difference in the enterprise, and when they're in the enterprise, they're kind of under the radar of the public, so people don't see them. But the changes that are being made, just the idea of being able to make replacement parts kind of on the spot. And imagine you're in the Army and you're in some war zone and some vehicle fails and needs a part. If you have a 3D printer and can print up a part to spec and put it in there rather than wait for it to get pulled from a warehouse in the U.S., put on a plane, maybe 2 or 3 different planes in transit or a ship, it can take a long time to get there. So the maintenance industry is an area that will really benefit from that. But also the ability to prototype new parts before you get into an expensive manufacturing process, where you basically can design something with CAD software, computer-aided design software, and just plug that into a 3D printer and make the part. And there are 3D printers now that will, it used to be the original ones were some kind of waxy plastic, but now there's metal. There's a wide variety of different materials that have, obviously different strength properties, different stiffness properties, so you can make a lot of different parts. It's not just a matter of creating a shape, it's creating a usable part that will stand the stress and strain of whatever its operation is.
Do you see a day where it will be in every house, a 3D printer? So.
I don't know that people will need them individually. I think it could be something like Kinko's,
Right,
you know,
good, Aaron.
and maybe what you do if you're designing something at home and then you just send it to them and print it out and go pick it up. It depends on how large. One of the issues with 3D printing is really one of scale. That 3D printers get very expensive as you start making larger and larger parts. So you can, tinker at home with a little thing, and if that's all you need, that's fine. But if you happen to want to make a picture frame for an odd-shaped picture, some painting that somebody made that was octagonal, you could very quickly do that.
Now, Jeff, you are also an inventor.
Yes.
And I know you have at least one patent. Can you tell us what you have a patent for?
Well, actually, yeah, I have several patents. One is actually for a financial instrument. It's as you may be aware that there's a kind of niche market for leveraged index ETFs,
Right.
and it got a lot of bad press, rightly so. It wasn't that anyone was doing anything underhanded, but they're subject to the volatility of the market, and volatile markets, they don't perform as one might expect. They perform according to the prospectus, but it's counterintuitive. And I came up with a way of constructing an ETF or a mutual fund that you could leverage an index, and it would always maintain fidelity with the underlying index. So if the index was up, you were up by the amount of leverage. If it was down, you'd be down, but if it was neutral, you'd be neutral. Whereas in the current funds, typically they have a 1-day period at which they're reindexed. They'll maintain their 2x or 3x for 1 day, but after that all bets are off, and even if the market moves in the direction you anticipate, you could actually lose money just if there's a lot of volatility. So
That's great. That's impressive.
Yeah.
So we have probably about a minute left. Is there anything else you want to share with the viewers?
No, nothing particular.
Well, let's talk about this FBI Apple furor and the breaking into the phones. What's your take on that?
Well, I think people, the kind of common wisdom was, well, we want to stop terrorists, and no one will refute that. So there was a lot of people that I know, at least, thought, well, we should therefore, make Apple do this. And what people don't realize is that if our government compels Apple to do it, other governments could do the same thing. I mean, there's no reason. Apple operates in China.
Right.
Apple operates, I presume, in the Soviet Union or in Russia. It's now Russia. That they could make they could try to compel the same thing. And if there happen to be selling phones in a country that is our enemy, I'm not so sure that people would want that. As well, it creates a honeypot to attract hackers to get this very valuable technology. Once you've created it, you've got to store it somewhere.
Right. So unfortunately, we probably have to end there, but I take it you were against it, obviously.
Yes.
So thank you. It was a great show. Please join us next week. Our special guest will be Dr. Steven Sipser, CEO of VisionLock. He's going to talk about the advances in eye surgery to help you see better. So please join us. Your money matters. Thank you.